Welcome to HardScript.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. I realized something was wrong the night I came home from a 12-hour emergency repair and heard her laughing softly in the dark. Not on the phone, not with a friend, with someone on her screen. The glow lit up her face in a way I hadn't seen in months. Warm, open, alive. She didn't hear me walk in. She didn't even flinch when the door clicked shut. She just kept whispering into her phone, smiling like she was rediscovering parts of herself she never showed me anymore. I stood there in the hallway, work boots still on, hands frozen around my tool bag, and listened to the sound of my wife giving someone else the intimacy she'd been denying me for nearly a year. My name is Daniel Carter, 41 years old, refrigeration systems tech. People call me quiet, steady, the kind of guy who shows up, fixes the impossible, and doesn't waste breath on things that don't need saying. I spend most days crawling behind commercial units or driving from job to job in my Honda Accord, thinking about nothing more complicated than pressure gauges and compressor noise. That kind of life builds patience. But patience isn't the same thing as numbness. Not when the person you come home to pulls away every time you reach for her. My wife, Alyssa, built her world online. Fitness reels, smoothie bowls, daily stretches, brand-tagged leggings. A small audience, but loud enough to matter to her. Every ping, every comment, every late-night notification from a stranger carried more weight than anything I said. She used to tell me that posting helped her stay motivated. But somewhere along the way, motivation turned into validation, and validation turned into something else entirely. I first noticed the shift when she started taking her phone to bed, turning away from me, screen brightness low but still lighting her cheek. Nights got quiet, then colder, then empty. She'd say she was tired. She'd say she wasn't in the mood. She'd say it wasn't a big deal. Except it was happening every night. While her notifications buzzed like a secret heartbeat she was saving for someone else. That night, after hearing her laugh in the dark, I set my tool bag down, walked into the kitchen, and opened the fridge. Stood there in the cold air, letting it hit my face until everything inside me settled. I didn't confront her. I didn't ask who he was. I didn't say a single word. I just closed the fridge, made a mental note, and felt the first quiet fracture inside me. Small, sharp, and final. Some men break loud. I break by disappearing. The next morning, Alyssa acted like nothing had happened. She stood at the kitchen counter blending one of her protein shakes, filming a short clip for her followers, smiling into the camera with that bright, curated energy she saved for strangers. When she noticed me walking in, she gave a quick nod, the kind you give a coworker, not a husband. I sat down with my coffee, watched her switch between apps, waiting for the screen to light up the way it had last night. It did. Twice. I didn't ask who it was. Quiet men know that the moment you start asking questions you don't want the answers to, you give away ground you can't get back. After breakfast, I grabbed my keys and headed out to my Honda Accord. I'd bought it used years ago, and after mentioning it once, it just became the car, reliable, unassuming, exactly what I needed. I spent the day going from job to job, commercial kitchens mostly, repairing walk-ins and ice machines that refused to cooperate. The hum of compressors and the cold air biting at my fingertips gave me the kind of focus home didn't anymore. Around lunch, I stopped at a Walmart to grab replacement batteries for my gauges. As I walked through the aisles, I caught myself replaying her laugh from the night before. Not the sound itself, just the way it wasn't meant for me. That's the kind of thing a man feels in his ribs. I stood there in front of the display thinking I should be angry. But the truth was quieter than that. It wasn't fire. It was frost. When I got home that evening, Alyssa was on the couch editing a workout clip, legs tucked under her, headphones in. She didn't look up when I walked in. She didn't look up when I asked how her day was. She just kept tapping her screen, smiling at something only she could see. He said he'd heat up leftovers for dinner, but she just waved a hand. I still locked on her phone. Later, when I reached out to touch her shoulder, she flinched. Barely, but enough. She said she was exhausted. She said she wasn't in the mood. She said maybe tomorrow. And when she turned away, pulling the blanket up to her chin, her phone lit up again. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to her breathe, listening to the tiny vibration of another message she thought I didn't notice. That's when something inside me shifted. Not a break. Not yet. more like a switch flipping from warm to cold. If she was giving her intimacy to a screen, then eventually I would give nothing at all. And silence, once it starts, is hard to stop. The silence between us didn't start with a fight. It started with a choice. Mine. 2 days after that night, Alyssa asked if I could pick up some lighting equipment from Best Buy for her next workout video. She said it casually, like we were still operating as a team, like the gap between us wasn't widening with every late-night notification she pretended not to get. I agreed, but my voice didn't rise or fall. Just steady, neutral, a tone she wasn't used to hearing from me. While driving to the store, I felt something ease inside me. Not comfort, not peace, but release. For years, I'd been the one trying to pull us back together, initiating conversations, suggesting date nights, reaching for her in bed only to be told she was tired, busy, stressed, not in the mood. And every time she turned away, I swallowed it, telling myself marriages go through phases. But phases don't text you at midnight. They don't send heart emojis. They don't meet you after the gym, in parking lots you think I don't recognize from the background of your videos. I didn't need proof. Not the kind you scroll through. The shift in her body language was enough. Intimacy doesn't vanish, it migrates. When I got back home with the equipment, she barely looked up from her phone to say thanks. She had that half smile again, the one meant for someone else living behind a screen. I set the box down quietly and went to shower, letting the hot water run over my shoulders until my mind settled into that calm, metal-on-metal patience my job taught me. Later, while she filmed in the living room, I sat at the kitchen table, fixing a set of gauges I'd been meaning to recalibrate. She tried talking to me twice, small talk, surface level, the kind of sentences you offer when you're trying to appear normal. He answered with short responses, nothing cold, nothing rude, just minimal. She noticed. I could feel her eyes flick toward me between takes, checking whether I was upset, waiting for me to ask why she'd been distant, waiting for me to confront her. But confrontation requires energy, and my energy was no longer hers. That night, she climbed into bed and lay with her back to me, like always. I didn't reach for her. I didn't try. I didn't even wait for the usual refusal. I just breathed evenly, eyes open in the dark, listening to the faint sound of her phone lighting up again. She glanced at me once, maybe expecting a question, but I had none. When a man stops asking, he's not forgiving. He's detaching. By the end of that week, the shift between us wasn't a crack anymore. It was a quiet canyon. Not loud, not dramatic, just wide enough that neither of us bothered trying to cross it. Alyssa kept filming her morning routines, posting clips, responding to comments with sparkles in her eyes she hadn't shown me in months. I watched her sometimes from the doorway, the way she lit up when her phone buzzed. She'd angle her face just right, tilt her hips, adjust her top. Not for me. Not anymore. For him. For the man who lived in her DMs like a shadow I couldn't see but felt every night. Friday morning she left early for the gym, saying she needed to get content before the place got busy. She said it like she was talking to a roommate. No kiss. No touch. Not even the habitual, love you, she used to throw over her shoulder. Just the sound of the door closing and her car pulling away. I stood in the kitchen holding my coffee, staring at the space she'd just stepped out of, and realized the part of me that used to chase her had finally stopped moving. The house felt colder than usual, which is ironic for a refrigeration tech. I grabbed my jacket and headed out for a job in a strip mall 20 minutes away, an ice cream shop with a walk-in that wouldn't hold temp. I lost myself in the work, tightening copper lines, testing pressure, listening to the familiar hum when the system came back to life. Machines don't lie. They break, but at least they tell you why. On the way home, I stopped by Starbucks, ordered a black coffee, and sat in the corner watching people rush in and out, faces lit by screens, conversations half finished because notifications seemed more urgent. It felt like watching my marriage in miniature. When I walked into the house around 3, Alyssa was on the couch curled into a blanket, scrolling with that glassy, half-smiling look she reserved for him. I set my keys down quietly. She didn't hear. Or maybe she didn't care. She didn't ask how my day was. She didn't ask anything. A few hours later, I saw the proof she didn't intend to show. Her phone lit up on the counter with a preview from Instagram. Can't wait to see you tonight. She moved fast, snatched it, angled her body away, said it was nothing. but the tone in her voice told me everything. I didn't argue. I didn't ask questions. I didn't even look at her. I just nodded, walked past her, and let the silence rise between us like frost creeping across glass. She took her intimacy to a stranger behind a screen, so I took mine back from her entirely. And that was the beginning of me disappearing right in front of her eyes. The night she got that message, she told me she was meeting a friend from her gym. She said it lightly, almost carelessly, like she'd rehearsed the line enough times that it no longer tasted like a lie. I nodded, kept my face steady, and went back to tightening a bolt on one of my toolkits. She waited for a reaction that never came, then left the house in a hurry, perfume lingering in the doorway long after her car pulled away. I sat there in the living room for a while, listening to the quiet stretch out around me until it felt like part of the furniture. The walls used to hold warmth. Now they held space, a kind of slow, steady emptiness that didn't ask questions and didn't require explanations. I turned on the TV, scrolling until I landed on some old documentary on Disney+, something about deep-sea vessels and the pressure they're built to withstand. It felt appropriate. Pressure makes breaks, or it makes steel. Around 9, I grabbed my jacket and took a walk around the block. Not to follow her, not to check, just to clear the fog in my head. The air was cool, the neighborhood quiet except for a couple of kids tossing a basketball in a driveway. Normal life. Other people's lives. Lives where spouses came home to each other instead of glowing screens and late-night secrets. When I got back, the house was still empty. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the pattern of light on the wall from a street lamp outside. I realized then that the hollow feeling I'd been carrying wasn't fear. It wasn't jealousy. It was exhaustion. The kind that settles into your bones when you've tried for too long to bridge a gap someone else keeps widening. She came home close to midnight. I heard the door open softly, like she hoped I'd already be asleep. She tiptoed through the hallway, phone still in her hand, screen lighting her face. She didn't come into the bedroom. She didn't check if I was awake. She just stood in the kitchen for a long moment, probably waiting to see if I'd say something. I didn't. I lay there breathing evenly, not pretending, just detached enough to feel nothing. When she finally walked into the room, she paused at the foot of the bed. I could sense her searching for the man who used to reach for her even after she pushed him away. But he wasn't there anymore. Silence had taken his place, and she felt it for the first time. The next morning, Alyssa tried something she hadn't tried in months. She made small talk. Not real conversation, just light, surface-level questions about my schedule, like she was checking a weather forecast. I answered with the same measured tone I'd been using all week. Not cold, not warm, just factual. She kept glancing at me over her smoothie like she was studying a stranger. When I left for work, she followed me to the door, something she hadn't done since her following count passed 20,000. She asked if I'd be home for dinner. He said he wasn't sure. I watched her expression shift, just slightly, like she was trying to decide if she should push or let it go. She let it go. On the drive to my first job, the quiet in the Honda Accord felt different, less like absence, more like clarity. I fixed a series of freezer units across town, the rhythmic tapping of tools grounding me in a way the house no longer could. Midday, I stopped at a Walmart to grab electrical tape and a new pair of work gloves. As I walked the aisles, I felt something settle inside me. Not peace, not acceptance, more like a man finally remembering his own weight. When I got home that afternoon, Alyssa was filming another routine, but her energy was off. The smile didn't reach her eyes. She kept checking the doorway, as if waiting for me to interrupt or react. I didn't. I passed through the living room quietly, grabbed a bottle of water, and went to the garage to finish a repair on one of my portable units. I could feel her watching me from the doorway, unsure how to bridge the distance she'd carved out. Later that evening, while she edited a video on the couch, her phone buzzed, lighting her face in a familiar glow. But this time, instead of smiling, she locked the screen quickly and placed it face down. She looked over at me, waiting to see if I'd noticed. I had. I just didn't care enough to show it. When she went to bed, she hesitated before lying down, as if waiting for me to reach for her like I used to. But I stayed on my side of the mattress, staring at the ceiling, feeling nothing but the steady rhythm of my own breathing. She whispered goodnight. I didn't respond. That silence hit her harder than any accusation could have. She shifted under the blanket, pulling it tighter around herself like she suddenly felt cold. The truth was simple. She'd stopped choosing me long before I stopped choosing her. I just finally matched her pace. By the middle of the next week, Alyssa finally realized something she hadn't expected, that a man can stay in the same house and still be gone. She kept circling me like someone testing the temperature of a room she didn't recognize. I'd come home from work, wash up, make dinner for myself without asking if she wanted any, and then sit in the garage or on the back patio while she hovered in the doorway, pretending to look for something to say. One evening, I was repairing a condenser fan from a restaurant job when she stepped into the garage holding 2 mugs of tea. She almost never made tea. She said she thought I might want some. He told her I was fine. She lingered anyway, her eyes drifting over the scattered tools and metal parts, like she was trying to remember who she married. I kept working, slow and steady, the way I always did. She waited for a conversation. I didn't give her one. Later, she filmed a quick workout set in the living room, but her usual energy wasn't there. She stumbled through her lines, restarted twice, and kept glancing toward the hallway where I'd disappeared to shower. Normally, she'd light up when messages came in during filming. That night, her phone chimed only once, and instead of smiling, she turned the screen over so she couldn't see the name. That was the first time I saw worry in her movements instead of excitement. When she finally came to bed, she didn't immediately turn away. She lay on her back, staring at the ceiling like she was working up the courage to say something real. She asked if everything was okay between us. He said he was tired. She waited for more, but that was all I offered. Her silence after that was heavy, the kind that fills a room when someone realizes the ground beneath them is shifting. The next day, after finishing 2 repair calls, I stopped by a Starbucks on my way home. I sat outside with a black coffee, watching people come and go, each one woven into their own rhythms. It struck me how long it had been since Alyssa and I existed in the same rhythm. Maybe years. Maybe since before she decided a stranger online understood her better than her own husband. When I got home, she was in the kitchen scrolling through her archived stories, something she only did when she was spiraling. She didn't hear me walk in. Her face was tight, unsettled, eyes searching through old posts like she was trying to pinpoint the exact moment her life drifted sideways. She asked if I wanted to watch something together on TV. Her voice sounded small, almost tentative. I said I had work to catch up on and walked past her, heading to the garage. Behind me, I heard her exhale, sharp, frustrated, and scared in a way she hadn't been before. And that's when it hit her. She wasn't losing me to another woman. She was losing me to nothing at all. The night everything shifted, I didn't plan it. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was just the next quiet step in a pattern she never expected me to follow through on. I came home later than usual after a long repair on a supermarket freezer line. My hands were still cold from working inside the unit, a kind of cold that sinks into your joints and stays there. When I walked through the door, Alyssa stood at the kitchen counter, staring at her phone like it had betrayed her. She didn't jump or hide it this time. She just looked stunned, like something finally broke through the fog she'd been living in. He asked if she was okay, in the same flat tone I used for customers who needed an update on parts. She looked up, eyes rimmed red, and said she'd had a weird day. Her voice didn't have its usual shine. She said one of her followers sent her a message that made her uncomfortable. The way she said uncomfortable told me everything. He wasn't just a follower anymore, and the dynamic she thought she controlled wasn't playing out the way she imagined. I didn't respond. I hung my keys on the hook, washed my hands, and made myself a sandwich. She watched me the entire time, waiting for the kind of questions that used to come easily. I didn't ask any. When I finished, I walked past her and sat down at the table with a notebook from work, jotting measurements from the job so I wouldn't forget them in the morning. She stayed frozen for a moment before finally sitting across from me. She asked if I wanted to watch something together, maybe a movie on Disney+. I said I needed to rest. She blinked, surprised by how fast the answer came. No hesitation. No softness. Just truth. Her breathing changed after that. Shallow, uneasy. Like she was finally hearing the silence for what it was. Later, I went to the garage to double-check the parts list for a morning call. Alyssa followed me to the doorway, leaning against the frame like she didn't know how close she should stand. She said she felt like I was pulling away from her. He said he didn't know how else to move anymore. That was enough to make her flinch harder than any accusation would have. She stepped closer, reaching for my arm, and I stepped back. Not resentful, just distant. Measured. She whispered that she missed us. He told her I'd been missing us for a long time. Her eyes filled fast, but I didn't move toward her. I didn't comfort her. I didn't negotiate with the same intimacy she'd already given to someone else. A man doesn't rebuild a bridge alone. And she was finally starting to realize the bridge between us wasn't broken. It was gone. The next morning, Alyssa woke up before me. That hadn't happened in months. She sat on the edge of the bed, shoulders slumped forward, scrolling through her phone with the kind of dread people get when they finally see consequences arriving instead of likes. When I stood up to shower, she asked if we could talk later. I told her I had a full schedule. That was true, but even if it hadn't been, the answer would have stayed the same. Work felt strangely steady that day. I repaired a set of walk-in coolers for a small bakery downtown, the kind of job that required precision and patience. The owner offered me a free pastry on my way out. I took a black coffee instead, stood outside for a minute letting the steam rise into the cold air. It struck me that the quiet I carried now wasn't heavy. It was structural, like steel after tempering. Around noon, I stopped by a Walmart to restock fuses and wiring caps for my kit. As I walked through the aisles, I caught my reflection in one of the freezer doors. I looked tired, sure, but lighter in a way I hadn't expected. Like I'd stepped out of a version of myself that had been shrinking for too long. The version that waited for affection, for attention, for effort, for anything she'd never planned to give back. When I came home that evening, Alyssa was sitting at the kitchen table without her phone. That alone told me how serious she thought this was. She asked if I could sit with her. I stood instead. She said she needed to explain. She said things had gotten out of control. She said the man from Instagram wasn't who she thought he was. She said he'd been pushing for more. She said she made mistakes. He didn't interrupt. I just stood there listening while her voice cracked around the edges. When she finished, she looked at me like she was waiting for a verdict. He said one sentence. I stopped chasing the moment you stopped caring. Her face crumpled, but not from guilt. From realization. She finally understood this wasn't about cheating anymore. It was about absence. The months of refusals. The slow erosion. The intimacy she handed to a notification instead of her husband. The pieces she'd given away without thinking they mattered. She reached for me like she used to when she wanted reassurance. But reassurance isn't something you hand out once you've gone quiet inside. I stepped back. Not to punish. Just to stay honest. She whispered that she couldn't lose me. I didn't say she already had. Some truths don't need sound. They just settle between two people and stay there. Alyssa spent the rest of that night drifting through the house like she didn't know where to stand. She kept starting sentences she couldn't finish, glancing at me as if waiting for the version of myself who used to reassure her, fill in her blanks, steady her storms. But that version was gone. Quietly, without drama, the way cold air slips out of a room when someone leaves the door open too long. I sat at the kitchen table fixing a faulty thermostat from a job I'd brought home, the small clicks of my tools filling the silence she didn't know how to handle. Finally, she said she wanted to work on us. The phrase sounded borrowed, like something she'd read online. She talked about boundaries, about deleting accounts, about taking breaks from social media. Every solution she offered felt like a bandage for a wound she hadn't bothered to examine until it was too deep to close. He said he heard her. Not understood. Not agreed. Just heard. She blinked, like she'd forgotten that hearing and caring aren't the same thing. After a while, she asked if we could at least watch something together. She gestured toward the living room, toward the couch, where we hadn't sat side by side in months. I almost said no. But something in her posture, small, uncertain, made me nod once. Not to reconcile. Just to sit. She put on a movie, something soft and familiar. I couldn't even tell you the title. She leaned slightly toward me at first, waiting for me to inch closer the way I used to when things were tense. But I didn't move. I stayed exactly where I was, hands folded, eyes forward. Halfway through, she pulled her knees up to her chest, realizing the distance wasn't closing. When the movie ended, she asked if I wanted anything from the kitchen. I said I was fine. She lingered for a moment, then walked away slowly. I could hear her open the fridge, shuffle around, close it again. No real purpose, just movement to escape the quiet. Before going to bed, I stood on the back porch for a minute, letting the cold night settle around me. A couple walked by with their dog, laughing softly. Ordinary life moving on, simple and unbroken. Inside, Alyssa's silhouette passed faintly behind the bedroom curtain. A woman suddenly aware of what silence feels like when it's not a punishment, but a boundary. When I finally lay down beside her, she whispered that she hoped things could still be fixed. He didn't answer. Not out of cruelty. Out of truth. Some fractures don't explode. They freeze, slow, quiet, final. And by the time she realized I wasn't leaving the house, I'd already left the marriage. What would you have done in my place? If the story hit you, leave a like. And don't forget to subscribe. It only gets stronger from here.